Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have this conversation. Right on the tail of Oprah's menopause revolution. I feel like perfect timing.
It is perfect timing. Well, it's every day is perfect timing for
Yes.
this topic and these conversations. So I'm happy to do it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I want to just dive right in, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So perimenopause, menopause, it's kind of having its moment right now. And I feel like especially perimenopause is being used so frequently. Could you give us a little idea of what exactly is perimenopause? Menopause, from my understanding, is
Yeah, and I'll go through, pre-menopause,
yeah,
perimenopause, menopause, and then
great.
postmenopause is sort of the journey that of a woman's reproductive life cycle. And the premenopause is when we're in our 20s and 30s, we're menstruating, we're having our cycle, maybe having babies, getting pregnant, having babies. That's sort of the premenstrual period. Once we hit mid to late 30s, early 40s, that's when hormones start to fluctuate. Not necessarily fall, but they kind of go up, down, become irregular, highs and lows. And it's the highs and lows, the withdrawal of estrogen in particular, that really impact women, how women feel, their mood, their well-being, their cognitive function and memory, their irritability, feeling ability to manage stress, anxiety. They tend to feel more irritable and edgy and short fused, or weepy and depressed, or combination of them both. But the fluctuation in hormones can be extremely disturbing, disabling, and interfering with normal everyday life. And it's something that really needs to be taken seriously that hasn't been. That's why there's so much like hysteria right now about perimenopause, because these women are waking up and realizing, oh my God, that's what this is. And I've been on Prozac and Adderall and diet pill, and all, and homeopathic this and that, and lubes and oils, and all this was perimenopause. So it is a time when our hormones start to fluctuate and to some degree decline, that where women will start to first experience symptoms of menopause. And the only reason we're saying perimenopause is because they're not yet menopausal. And when you become menopausal, all that means is you haven't had a period for a year. And in the perimenopause, you might be having a period regularly. You might be having a period irregularly, once every 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, 2 months, whatever it is, as long as you're still bleeding in some way, shape, or form, by definition, your period is not menopause. If that doesn't mean that you can't be treated, and that doesn't mean that the symptoms are related to hormonal imbalance, and that doesn't mean that these symptoms aren't related to that.
Yeah.
So that's what we're finding, and I'll just acknowledge it. The medical community finally now is acknowledging that these symptoms that we have disregarded and neglected and ignored and undermined and minimized are real medical issues that impact quality of life, well-being, and for that matter, prevention, progression of disease, that are treatable. And we haven't been doing that.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah, yeah, I know you've been kind of a pioneer in this. What made you know that, like, no, this is something we need to pay attention?
Because I'm a woman, and it happened to me, and I'm 60 now. But when I went into perimenopause when I was 37, badly. It impacted me with a huge hit was mood and cognitive function.
Yep.
And I was in the middle of a fellowship, and I had to take my boards, and I was at UCLA working and in the lab, and like not having a brain was not an option. Like I was gonna have to quit. Like I really was disabled. Like I was one of the ones that really struggled. And I couldn't find a doctor. Literally, there wasn't an OBGYN, there wasn't an endocrinologist, there wasn't anybody that, in academia or not. In Europe, there were doctors in Europe that were doing hormone replacement therapy in younger women, including testosterone, but not here in the United States. So I had to learn, and I already was learning because I was in the sexual health field to begin with. So I had like a basic fund of knowledge, but I really had to kind of learn on my own through other innovators, thought leaders, researchers, neuroscientists. So I've been knowing what these neuroscientists have been doing for decades. And now all of a sudden it's like this brand new stuff. It's not brand new. We're just now talking about it. We've been knowing this for a very long time.
Yeah.
And those of us that have known it have been really frustrated and irritated and annoyed and and are doing our best to kind of heighten awareness and treat women and educate other doctors. But for this to change, what you're, in fact, what you're experiencing now in your practice in life is the only way that this is going to change and get better is if doctors, we as doctors, need to band together because we haven't before and set the standards, guidelines, consensus, the standard of care for managing these patients, and then the definitions for the disease or symptoms, and then that will lay the pathway for more research to be done and drugs to be approved. But until we do that, Oprah can get on her bandwagon, Naomi Watts, and the Schreiber, all of those people can be heightening awareness and championing and chanting and raising tension about the disparity and the inequities. But the only way
I lost audio real quick. I don't know.
political and government level. We're doing it here in our grassroots, like Dr. Mary Claire and me and others out in the public sector are like, waving our flag. And I had a dream, but for it to really make a difference, we're going to have to band together from the pharmaceuticals industry standpoint, from the public health standpoint, and from the board, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists, who should be in the forefront of this, leading this, stepping out. Don't you think that it's weird that we haven't seen the president of ACOG? It was a woman. I don't know what it is now. A woman who was basically a puppet, just not, So who is the leader of that organization? Where is that voice right now? Why aren't they coming forward, taking accountability for the problem that we're having, not training all of their providers, but which has a ripple effect on the endocrinologists, the primary care doctors, the internists, all of them. The gynecologists are like, we don't know. How are these other doctors supposed to know? So
yeah,
it's a big problem.
Yeah. And education on that level, but also do you feel education for each individual woman to know what's happening in their body?
100%. Well, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
We're here right now, you and I, because of women, that them realizing, and the only reason this has happened, and I link it, I can go back in time to when I started to see the dots. It was TikTok. TikTok didn't exist. Like in my lifetime, TikTok is new. Like, so I'm in the time when it didn't exist, and so do you. So TikTok was just in the infancy. COVID was just coming under control. It was still lingering, but people were still kind of optimistic about coming out of COVID, and there was like hope, and women were talking to each other, and they were starting to raise awareness, because what happened is COVID caused a huge amount of societal stress. So we were all under a huge amount with a global pandemic, whether we had it or not, or people dying in New York, didn't matter. Just the global pandemic being in the we all experienced stress. And that was throwing premenopausal women into menopause, menopausal women to postmenopausal. People with symptoms were getting worse. So that factor, raised awareness. The media caught hold of that. Like, wait a minute, stress is impacting our hormones. It's throwing these ladies into menopause. So those conversations were being had on a like global media level in the midst of COVID, and that was the trigger for the next phase of like, wait a minute, what they say about hormones? Wait a minute,
Yeah,
you can't sleep. That's hormone. Wait a minute, the low libido is due to that, not just because my husband is home all day and he looks ugly and sweat, but this could be hormonally related. Like it was just all of a sudden a wake up call that was triggered by a global pandemic. And I think that if that didn't happen, this would have happened anyway, eventually, but it would have taken longer and it would have been less of a movement happening like this. And it had to be a movement in order to create
yeah,
change in a
yeah.
meaningful way. It was,
Absolutely. And in my practice, being a psychotherapist, I see a lot of the cognitive, emotional, relational impacts of hormone changes. And a lot of times women being told, oh, well, that's just the way it is. There's nothing you can do about it. And, oh, it's all in your head. Like so much dismissal in women's
mhm.
experiences. Do you find that women come to you and they don't really know what's happening? You end up having to educate them a lot. And
Well,
if so,
yes, and get in the early part half of my career for sure. Even now, but due to these conversations and the social media like phenomena, most of the fact that there's like 20-year-old guys talking about menopause. We were at dinner at Steak 48 or something like a fancy steakhouse at one time, and there was a table of men dining like bankers kind of like
yeah,
Wall Street
yeah,
kind of guys. And they were talking about menopause. I couldn't believe it. The fact that the conversations are happening with men that aren't in that demographic, younger men. So these were mid to late 30s, 40s, maybe with wives who are just starting to enter it, but certainly not in the throes of it. And there was interest and at least awareness and a public kind of perception about what it is and what it means. So, yeah, I think that has really the social media and the social awareness is this is a beautiful example of how that a social like a medical issue becomes a social issue, which then becomes a political and financial issue. And it's when it gets to be that level of intensity, that that's the movement of it and the gravity of it and the weight of it, and it's not going to go away.
yeah,
But what I worry about is that it's going to turn into a cyclone of capitalism
mhm,
and marketing people and dollars being thrown at this problem. Like these poor women and they don't have any solutions. Let's create apps. Let's create these supplements. Let's create ways to measure their microbiome, saliva and breast milk and poop and everything else. And,
yeah,
so we are a little bit in that muddled phase of consumerism right now, which then leads to a little bit of hysteria, which then finally, hopefully, then the FDA or the people will come in to kind of set the standard when things get out of control. That's what happened with vaginal rejuvenation. I don't know if you remember. There was like it was on every corner. People were talking about, and then all of a sudden ACOG, the American Obstetricians and Gynecologists, their governing bodies came out and about safety, and this is a safety concern, and it can burn people, and this is a form of genital mutilation. So they created all of this hysteria and fear and taboo in a different sense. So now we're mutilating our women,
wow,
and but that's what then the pendulum swings. It had gotten out of control.
yeah,
And so now it's sort of back in the box. And the same thing with menopause. The hysteria is out of control with awareness, and how we used to joke about Prozac Nation, like
yeah,
everybody was on
yes,
Prozac. That's what. So I fear that we're and everyone's on Ozempic now. Like literally every person I know practically overweight and not, they're on it for some other reason because it prevents fatty liver or then it helps my acne and like
Right.
so sort of
Right.
like that. And now it's going to be the same with hormone replacement therapy where they've destigmatized it to such a degree that it's like, brushing your teeth and everyone should be on this and it's in our wine and it's like CBD,
Yeah.
CBD's in the wine and the soap and the everywhere.
Yeah, that's a really, great point. I haven't heard that side of the conversation, but it makes so much sense to
Mhm.
absolutely kind of know how far the pendulum can swing and what to look out
Mhm.
for. What do you encourage your patients and people tuning in to maybe be asking specific questions, or what do they need to be aware of for their own well-being? What questions should they be asking
I
doctors
think
or
like if you're younger in your early to mid 30s, it's you need to be aware, just aware of what the changes are that can occur, aware of what your individual risk factors are, because every woman goes, generally the same thing happens to us all, but the way that we experience it and the symptoms that we have, the severity of them, and the risks for diseases, our genetic predispositions, is individually defined. What's for you, your journey is different than me. So it's important as we're becoming educated now, raising awareness about that, about what we can expect, what we can do now, lifestyle wise, diet wise, supplement wise, to enhance and optimize hormone balance so that when we do start going through the changes that we do so in a more seamless way, a more educated and prepared way, and that we can minimize, the suffering and mitigate the symptoms that we can treat. Because there's no reason why women should not be able to live happier, healthier, sexually vital, productive, cognitively productive in the workplace, creatively productive in life, and having their motivation. When testosterone levels decline, we lose our motivation to even have fun, much less do work and things that are daunting and overbearing. So in order for us as women to remain productive and competitive with men in the workplace, hormone replacement therapy is essential. In my opinion, as a doctor and as a woman, everything in terms of health, wellness, and longevity starts and stops with hormone balance. And then from there, once we optimize hormone balance, then we can worry about, our skin sagging and our fat there and our hemoglobin A1C and, what our, our just general overall health. Optimizing hormone balance prevents disease. It optimizes our cardiovascular health, our neurological health, our bone mineral density, our joints, our muscles, our tendons, all of that, not to mention our the nerves in our bodies and our brains, the mirror neurons in our brains, the pineal gland and the connections between the areas of our brain and how quickly our neurons fire is all impacted by hormones.
yeah, that's a great point. That's the baseline of where we need to start.
Mhm.
And do you encourage women to go at it from mind body, do the therapeutic work, the cognitive behavioral work alongside hormone therapy?
100%, like not just for this, but for everything, the mind body approach. What I've learned, and I was trained as a surgeon, like to fix things, like talking to people about their sexuality and intimacy and like that. I really didn't set out to do this. It sort of developed and evolved out of a need, what I perceived as a need in female patients in particular. But what was the question? I'm totally spacing
Mind
out.
body, the mind body
The
approach.
mind body is I've learned that the our brains have an incredible ability and power to both heal and engender wellness, and the opposite, create disease and disharmony and dysfunction and inflammation. And we as humans, most of us, although social consciousness is changing, and I'm seeing a podcast in this area, but that we aren't really aware from a scientific, from a theological and philosophical perspective. We're aware about, you know, harmony and manifesting and positive, we're, most of us have a general kind of understanding of that, but not when it comes to health and science. And what I realized is that the patient's perspective about how they process daily the stuff that's coming in, so how they're wired and how they relate to the world and what their perception is about themselves, their illness, their everything else, has an impact on their health. And it's not, and I haven't like discovered this and identified it, but they have now identified links between autoimmune disorders and, you know, um, worry, fear, stress, people that are, what about this and what about that? The frontal cortex activity, a lot of women have this. We're great multitaskers, innovators, leaders, managers, and you can, but it's hard to shut that off.
Yeah.
And then go to your sensing feeling brain instead of your thinking doing brain.
Yeah.
So yeah, the understanding how our thoughts, not just our relationship with others, but how our emotional state impacts everything, the our jobs, our relationships, and our health. That is was really powerful for me as a doctor, because as a doctor we think, we're trained and brainwashed to think that we can just give this, do that, we can mitigate things and keep things at bay, we can even cure things and eliminate things, but we can always do something. And when we can't do something, when there's no drug, which is what's going on with perimenopause, when there's no drug commercially available or FDA approved, and doctors aren't trained, then we don't like that. Like we don't, when it's out of our ribbon, we don't know what to do, and there's not a drug. We're just going to pretend like that doesn't exist, and so that's kind of where we've been, pretending like it doesn't exist, and that hormones are just bad, and we're just going to keep, not talking about it until gets to the point where people are waking up. It was inevitable.
Yeah.
Like this is, Handmaid's Tale is like it can't continue that way without,
Yeah.
war. Like this
Yeah.
is like a movie.
Yeah.
Because women are at a place now, following the women's movement and the feminists, that we're our generation is not just sitting back and saying, okay, this is what happens to us when we get old. We're just going to like trudge the happy road. We're not. We're like, our generation of women are demanding things to be different. We feel entitled, even more than us. The millennials behind, the people behind us, are even more entitled.
Yep.
And more demanding, and feel like, you know, that they're more deserving of change. So that's, what needed to happen.
Yeah, I am so glad that you mentioned all of that because, being a therapist, my job is to help women, you know, track and be in their bodies and be aware of their own well-being and learn to advocate for what they know is right for them, not just take some, external person's perspective or do this and that should work for you, but to be curious and ask questions. And so it's so nice to hear you speak about. I don't often hear medical doctors talk about just how important it is, your thoughts
Mm-hmm.
and being in your body and sensing things and being able to speak up for yourself and all of that. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just so grateful to have.
What I noticed is, and I made, like, it was a very clear like epiphany that I had a while ago, is that if there's a seed of hope, there's some people have it, some people don't. Some people are like the negative Nelly, like vin everywhere. There's whatever, I'm going to try it, but I have little faith that you're going to be able to do anything compared to other, there's on the spectrum of hope. But what I've noticed, though, even in the naysayers, if there's a glimmer, just a seed of hope where that person says, all right, like she might be full of shit, but I'm going to listen to it now. I paid all this money. Fine. Like, even if it's that is enough.
Yeah.
A little seed of hope that what this lady's saying might help me. Just that one little bit impacts every cell, every neuron, every blood vessel, every stroke of your heart, and even your DNA, that that seed of hope um, impacts our physiology. So what I learned to do is that, find that seed of hope, latch onto it, kind of highlight it in the context of whatever the issues are, and then I realized, like, well, wait a minute. Is this just placebo effect that I'm doing? Like, that I'm just like, giving them these things. Who knows if it's the estrogen or if that I just coddled her to the point where she, you know, and then like that bothered me for a while, years. And then finally I was like, doesn't matter if it's placebo effect or not. And maybe it is, and maybe it isn't, and maybe it's both,
Yeah.
but who cares? And by the way, I think Advil might be placebo effect too. Like we're like everything that we're doing. If
Yeah.
we believe that there is a benefit to taking this pill, that it's going to get rid of my headache or that it's going to help my blood, it will for sure.
Absolutely.
So once I realized that, then everything became easy. Like the practice of medicine becomes easy if you can help people in that way.
Amazing.
Keep a positive attitude and outlook about their ability to heal and their agency in the relationship. That 60 to 80% is what they do and they believe, and then 20% is what I do and what I think and what I can give. But both of us have to do our part in order for for it to be effective.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, I don't want to cut into your lunch hour too long. I really
Anyways,
appreciate your
thank
time.
you.
Could talk to you for hours. I really appreciate it. Could you leave us with just a little talk about seed of hope? Could you plant a little seed of hope for women that are going through perimenopause, menopause, and what they can just kind of hold on to
Mhm.
based on the conversation?
Well, the good news is that we're at a point of change and at a point of awareness. And the best advice that I can say now to the younger woman that is entering into would be to get your labs checked now. Like before you're in the throes of it, have a general sort of baseline understanding of what your levels are when you're feeling okay. Maybe you're not great right now, but at least a baseline, so that when you do start to experience changes in symptoms, that we have a reference point of where you were. That's a big problem today, that most women coming in the throes of their symptoms, we don't have a reference point, and we're having to kind of guess or use other norms in order to calculate yours. So it is one of the changes that are occurring, and that women understand what the symptoms are. We started to talk about them. They can creep in up slowly and insidiously, or they can hit you over the head. Like, one day you wake up and women will say, I woke up and I'm 10 pounds fat. I don't know how this happened or what I did, but, so all of a sudden, these drastic changes in your body and your energy and your mood, think hormones. And it's very easy to blame, stress and blame divorce and blame, my kid has special needs or whatever life's issues. We blame those for not feeling great,
Yeah.
which they do take a toll and they do make us not feel great. But on top of hormonal imbalance, it can be a snowball effect. And it's important that you nip it in the bud, because if you wait, not only do your symptoms get worse, but you're at higher risk for some of the diseases associated with hormone imbalance when you enter menopause. So get checked now, know what your hormone levels are, ask the questions, and keep hopeful, because there are treatments that are available and it's only going to get better.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We will continue to follow along and listen to your words of wisdom. And thank you so much for doing the work that you do. There truly aren't enough people out there doing it. So thank you so much.
Thank
All
you.
right.